everyone.
I'm Nader.
And I'm Julie. We're the co-presidents of the UALC. This is the official UALC podcast where we talk about law school, the LSAT, and legal field.
Episodes go up every second Wednesday featuring law students, lawyers, professors, and so on. Thanks for listening. Welcome back, everyone, to the UALC podcast. We have with us here Dean Billingsley at the UofA Law.
So why don't we kick off the podcast with you just telling us a little bit about yourself, your journey leading up to law school, why you chose to pursue a career in law, and then ultimately how your career led from graduating to law school to becoming the Dean of Law here at the UofA.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. So I'll try not to go back too far to, birth dates or anything like that. But I'm from Calgary originally. Ended up sort of pursuing legal studies mostly because science was not my bag. So I was always more interested in the social science end of things. So I came to the U of A to do a degree in poli-sci. And through that, met a number of people that were in law school. And it just seems like such a natural fit for me. I never went to law school intending to practice law. I went to law school kind of as an academic interest. I thought it would be fascinating to find out about sort of how we make the rules, right, that we all live by. So I really wasn't sure what was going to be the end of law school for me. But I got into law school and then decided that the next natural step would be to qualify as a lawyer, right? So, and to see what practice was like. So I did that for a few years, really enjoyed practicing law. But one of the things I found a bit frustrating about it was that I would often get excited about wanting to delve really far into a legal issue. And so often things get resolved on a practical basis, right? Sort of settlements and things like that, because people, rightly so, from their perspective, don't want to spend the money to, just have the courts deal with a fascinating legal issue. They want their problem solved. So I found that, a little bit frustrating from someone like me who's very academically minded and sort of really wants to spend some time on the issues. So I decided to come back and do my master's, which I also did here at the U of A, and I did that in constitutional law. And then went back into practice after doing my master's and was invited by my supervisor to apply, my master's supervisor, that is, to apply for a teaching position as a sessional instructor. So just to give it a try to teach one course. It took me about 3 classes in to realize this was my dream. This is what I really, really wanted to do, because it was ideal. Like, you got to talk to students about big law ideas as well as sort of the practical application of law. So I got really excited about that and decided that I wanted to sort of redirect myself towards an academic career. Was lucky enough to get hired on faculty as a permanent faculty member. And I've been here doing that for 20 years or so here at the Faculty of Law. When the position of dean became available, or they were sort of looking for a new dean as of July 1st, 2020, I was encouraged by some of my colleagues to take on that challenge. And I think service is important. So I thought maybe I can be of service to the faculty at this point in my career. So I put my name in, and now I'm here.
Definitely a fantastic example of, I would say, a non-traditional route, especially after getting a JD. So in the grand scheme of things, I guess, what would be some pieces of advice that you would have for undergraduate students just looking to pursue a career in law? Are there any essential qualities that you find someone should develop in undergrad to help them navigate law school and subsequently the legal system?
Yeah, so really generally, sort of playing off what you said at the beginning there about my route being a non-traditional route, the first thing I would say is have no assumptions, right? Don't planning too hard about very specifically what you want to do can cut you off from opportunities that you don't know are available to you. So that would be my first bit of advice: is don't think you're going to map it out years before you get to law school and have an absolutely clear idea of where things are going to go. it's great if they do go in that direction and you're happy with that, but you don't want to plan so firmly that you're not open to discovery of new things, right? So for example, when it had not occurred to me, I went and did my master's because I thought it was interesting. It hadn't really occurred to me that it would be a career-changing moment for me. And it was someone else who suggested, why don't you just give teaching a try? And it was, you know, a game changer for me. So that would be the first thing, is don't restrict yourself by planning too hard. In terms of preparing, like if you're an undergraduate student and you're thinking about law, get used to reading. And I really practice your reading, because there is a lot of reading in law school. And the more efficient you can become about your reading, the easier law school will be in that sense. Otherwise, I mean, there's nothing specific that makes the ideal law student, right? People come to law school from all sorts of different perspectives. And so I think, you know, in addition to reading, maybe, you know, critical analysis skills, right? And the ability to be open to other ideas. So, you know, attending, you know, talks and presentations and thinking critically about what you've heard or what you've read, so that you sort of develop a voice and develop those critical thinking skills. But I think for the most part, any undergraduate program will help with that, right?
Yeah, like you said, law is an interesting one because you can come from any background and it brings so many different perspectives into the field. But like in regards to the application process, do you find that there's any like advice or patterns that you could give to our listeners that you find would make them a stronger applicant, or something that they should watch out for on their applications?
So I want to just say, first of all, we're in the process of doing a review of our admissions processes. So things may be tweaked or changed over the next couple of years. Excuse me, but the way that we do our admissions right now, about 80% of our admissions are done on a numeric basis. So they're done on the basis of a combined indicator score, which is a combination of your LSAT and your GPA. So the easiest way, I suppose, to be admitted to our law faculty, and different law faculties across the country have different entry requirements, is to have a excellent GPA and an excellent LSAT score, right? Because if you can get in on that basis, that's terrific, right? We then there is a personal statement that every applicant submits, but we review the personal statements for people who would not make that numeric mark necessarily, right? So the best thing that you can do is work on your LSAT preparation skills, right? Take the courses that are available. I know you can download off the internet now sample materials and stuff, like spend the time to work on that score, and work hard in your undergraduate to get grades. That is the simplest way to get in.
Of course, definitely some great pieces of advice there. Can you perhaps explain the holistic review process in more depth? Is there a certain threshold which an applicant must meet based on their statistics to be considered for a holistic admission? Or is anyone who is not offered a seat based on their statistics alone considered for subsequent holistic review?
Yeah, so under our present system, we have two entry streams. So one is the general entry stream and one is the Indigenous category. And they operate slightly differently. So with the holistic review on the general category, we would have a minimum threshold of the combination of LSAT and GPA. And it varies from year to year, so I can't give you a number of that. And it wouldn't make any sense anyway, because it's a combined kind of score thing. So if you are at or just below that minimum, then a holistic review gets done on your file. And the idea there is people are reading the personal statement to see if there's some compelling reason in this person's background that their scores are not really indicative of what we think they'd be able to do at law school, right? So it may be that there was some specific challenge that they were facing either at the time that they wrote their LSAT or during their undergraduate that impacted their grades. So for example, you had to have a full-time job while you were doing your undergraduate studies or something like that. So that's kind of what we're looking for. Or perhaps there's something exceptional in that person's background that suggests to us that, oh, wow, they would be a really good candidate, even though their scores, are a bit lower than you might expect. The Indigenous application category is different. So for students who self-declare as Indigenous and who are not admitted on the basis of numbers themselves, we have a lot of Indigenous students who are admitted on the basis of the numbers. But otherwise, their application then gets looked at in this category. There is no minimum threshold here. All those files get reviewed. And it's the same idea. What we are looking for is indications that this person would be successful at law school, right? It's a cruel kindness to admit anyone under any category if we don't think that they're going to be able to thrive here at law school. And sometimes that's just at the point, it's all at the point in time, right, when you're applying. So it may be not this year, but maybe 2 years from now, circumstances are different and you're ready. So.
Yeah, interesting. So as you know, of course, the past few admission cycles have been some of the most competitive ones in the U of A law's history. Are you able to speak a little bit about like the current admission cycle and the statistics that you're seeing to maybe some of those students who are listening and are anxiously waiting for their acceptance? Is there anything you can say to kind of assure them about maybe the trend we're seeing this year?
Yeah, so I would just say don't panic. The process works itself out over several months, right? You don't need to be the first person to get an offer to end up in our program and be super successful at it. And there's always people on the wait list who, get a letter at the end of August saying, come next week, and they're invited to be in. So that's the first thing. I can't really speak to statistics on the process because those are not available till after the whole process is done. I will say that, the number of applications we've received over the last 3 or 4 years has been fairly steady. It's usually in the 1,200 range. We let in 185 students per year. So it is quite competitive. But if you've got an application in, take a deep breath, relax. It's only in September that you'll actually have a firm idea of whether you're here or not for in terms of who the whole class is.
Are there any perhaps other like assumptions or perhaps incorrect assumptions that individuals and students tend to make about law school and the admissions process that perhaps you might wish to correct them on?
Yeah, I think that I think this is changing, but I think when you say to somebody law student or lawyer, they have a picture of a particular kind of individual in mind, right? And I would encourage people to throw away whatever picture that pops into your mind as sort of the presumptive lawyer, right? I encourage you to think about it more like the Americans think about their presidency, right? Anybody can be president, right? It's the same thing. It's the same thing with law school, right? It is about working hard and wanting to be a lawyer. There will, if that is your ambition, you will fulfill it if you do those things, right? If you work hard. So don't cut yourself off by saying, well, I'm not what law schools would look for, or I'm not a typical lawyer, or that sort of thing, right? And find, to the extent that you're talking to mentors in the community, make sure you're talking to people who are encouraging in that regard, right? Surround yourself with the best people.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I feel like people get really stressed about just getting in and they don't take a time to like figure out what their place may be in the field or what really draws them to law. Like with your experience, you said that you really just wanted to learn about the law itself and not so much about particularly becoming a lawyer. And I mean, we've seen how that plays out. So just to kind of move on to the next question here, how have you managed to maintain a work-life balance throughout your career? And do you have any suggestions for avoiding burnout in such a rigorous profession like law?
Yeah, I don't think that there is a time that isn't a challenge, right? And I would say that with almost any career that you're going to qualify as a profession, right? If you have a career where you come in at 9 and you leave at 5, that's easier to manage with a work-life balance because the expectations of when your day ends are really clear. But the minute you are into a profession, it's kind of like being a student in an undergraduate program. When do you stop studying, right? There's always something else you can do, right? There's always more work you can engage in, and so you have to learn to set your own limits. And the I don't want to really call it a struggle, but the need to balance that never goes away, right? So there's a couple things I would say about that. The first thing is, and I encourage every law student to do this, and every student that I talk to that's going out to do their articling or to start being a lawyer, find one thing that you love to do that has nothing to do with the law, and make sure that you consistently do it, right? And that you don't give it up, because it will help sort of anchor you, right? As otherwise you can kind of get sort of sucked into this idea of there's always work to do and that's all you're doing. It also gives you the opportunity to spend time with people who are not in the legal field. And, that can be, it's great having friends in the profession, absolutely wonderful, but it can be a very insular group, right? And I think it makes you a better lawyer as well, to be in contact with people who aren't engaged in the legal work or the legal community. So I'd say do that. And otherwise, it should just be a constant matter that you're thinking about, right? You don't want to get into that danger zone where you've put your head down. And there are times in your life, let me just say, there are times in life you're going to have to work unreasonably hard, right? To get to a particular point. But you don't want to do that unthoughtfully, and then have a number of years later, you're suddenly finding out that you've lost everything else in your life in terms of a priority in favor of work. And I'd say, that in my mind applies to law and a number of other things. Law is not unique in that way. So I just think, bearing it in mind all of the time, right? And trying to build in some time for the other aspects of your life that are priorities. And at the end of the day, law is important, but it's a career, it's not life, right?
I think that's definitely some fantastic advice, and can be applied across a vast majority of fields for sure. So I guess, knowing what you know now, if you could go back to your first day of 1L, is there anything you would do differently or advise yourself of?
Yes. And the thing that I would do differently is to be more patient, right? And be a little, goals are great. But there's, as I was saying before, all sorts of opportunities that will come your way, whether, from the simplest thing of, oh, there's a guest lecturer coming in today, right? And there's that debate in your mind of, but I could read for my next class and get that done. That's the goal oriented, right? Or I could go to this extra lecture and expand my knowledge, or expand, my interest, or learn something, that might pique my interest in something else. As a law student, I don't think I was patient enough with those things and gave myself enough of those opportunities. And they're unique, right? They're unique opportunities that come to you at law school. We bring in Supreme Court of Canada justices. We, have all sorts of people coming to give talks, and you don't realize how fortunate you are to be able to see those people, not be paying for $1,000 dinner while you're doing it. And yeah, so that would be the advice I'd have, is actually enjoy the process as much as the end goal.
And through that process, what was like the biggest lesson or takeaway you gained from pursuing a career in law, the law degree, and any like subsequent experiences that you got from the legal profession? Did you find that it changed your perspective on the world as you went through it and in different phases of it?
Yeah, one thing that I've become acutely aware of over the course of my career, and this is both dealing with students, people outside of the law school, family and friends, that sort of thing, is that a legal education really does privilege you, because it gives you an understanding of how systems are working that other people may not have, right? And it also, when you say to someone that you are a lawyer, I mean, a lot of people go running away from you. No, I'm just kidding. But it depending on the subject, of course, that you're dealing with, but it commands a certain sense of authority, right? People think you know things. People listen to your analysis. So it really is a privilege, and I think it has to be thought of as a service role, right? Like the job has to be of service to those who don't have that training or didn't get the opportunity to have that training. I really think that is important. It really gives you a special ability to make sense of things that are scary to most people, right? Because most people don't think they're encountering the law every day, but talk to someone who's trying to fill out an income tax form or, gets a subpoena or, any of those things. Like suddenly it's terrifying if you don't know how to navigate it. And I think everybody that has legal training needs to appreciate how lucky they are to have the tools to navigate that, and how important it is to understand that most people don't have that opportunity.
Yeah, puts a lot of things into perspective for us, and I'm sure all of our listeners when they hear this. And I mean, with that, I think our time is coming to an end, but it was definitely an amazing discussion, and we thank you for taking the time to sit down with us and again really put some things into perspective. So on behalf of the entire UALC and all of our listeners, thank you very much, Dean Billingsley.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.